Neil and Jonny.
Hello. Oh, hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Yeah, we love Friday too. So we're here today to talk to you guys about our story in mental health. I should do a quick who's who. I'm Neil Laybourn, and this is Jonny Benjamin, MBE. I have no title, but you have given me an extra E today, which I don't have. Thank you. I just need the M and the B at some point. It was really interesting just listening to those last few conversations because we were outside and we didn't come in. But you know that theme around applying policy and then the human interaction and the common sense bit in between. I always remember somebody said to me once, the thing about common sense is it's not so common. And you know, with mental health, often there are decisions to make about applying common sense and applying policy, and I think we realise that actually there's not much common knowledge around personal stories of mental health for various reasons we're going to touch on today. So I'm hoping that our story, both parts of it, can provide a bit more insight as in how to apply those decisions, but your daily actions as clinicians around mental health.
Good afternoon. So thank you very much for having us here. Very excited to be here and to talk to you. Very nice lunch, I have to say. Normally we get sandwiches normally, so that was nice. The Chinese was really nice. Thanks. So yeah, we're here obviously to talk about our story, talking about mental health, but also we talk about suicide as well. And we know this can bring stuff up for people. So we always start our talks by saying if anything does come up for anyone and it's too difficult, you know, to listen to what we're saying, please do take some time out. We don't want anyone to have to sit here and struggle if it's too much. So please do take some time out. And please do talk, you know. And at the end, we've got time for Q&A. So any questions, any thoughts, please do ask us or come and talk to us at the end. But we've got a lot to get through. So I'm going to take you back to the very beginning of our story. And the story starts here. So I was born on the 31st of January, 1987, in a place called Watford. Anyone from Watford, by any chance? Hey, were you born in Watford? Were you born, really? Watford General? Oh, great. Okay, and someone else down there. Who else? Yeah, were you born in Watford as well? Oh, what that? Doesn't matter. Yeah. So anyway, I was born in Watford. I grew up nearby, and I had a kind of typical childhood. So I grew up with a mum, dad, older brother, and everything seemed okay. Everything seemed fine. But for me, things started to change around the age of 3-4 years old. So when I was this age, I started to see things that weren't there. I started to hear things that weren't there. I became a lot more anxious, I wouldn't sleep properly, and I became quite violent as well. My parents didn't understand, obviously, what was going on, and they took me to the doctors a few times. Eventually, I was referred on to a child psychologist, and this is the letter to the psychologist. So I saw this psychologist for a while. I don't really remember much of our sessions, you know, I was really young at the time, so I can't really recall too much about it. But me and my parents, we didn't tell anyone else. We didn't want anyone else to know. It was kind of a bit embarrassing, you know, as seeing a psychologist at such a young age. So we tried to keep it to ourselves, and it just wasn't really talked about, really. I went through school. I went through primary school. Went through secondary school, and I always felt really different growing up. I just felt like I could never really fit in. I felt, yeah, just different to everyone else, all my classmates, and I spent a lot of time on my own growing up. But I was always top of the class. I was always kind of an A-grade student, and yeah, kind of the rest wasn't really picked up on. This is me when I started secondary school, and when I started secondary school, I lost my grandmother, who I was very close to, and after that, I started to hear a voice in my head. I think there's a link between that, for me losing my grandmother and hearing this voice in my head. I was hearing what I thought was the voice of an angel, and I thought everyone had a voice in their heads. I was convinced everyone else we all heard a voice, but we just didn't talk about it, just kind of kept it to ourselves. And I liked the voice being there. It was kind of a friend to me, to be honest. But the voice changed as I went through my teenage years. This is me around the age of 15, 16 with my brother. And at this age, the voice in my head changed. So it went from being this nice voice, this angel, to what I thought was the devil. And the voice became really difficult to live with. So it started telling me to do things. I would always have to say certain things, or I would have to do things in threes, like I'd have to touch things 3 times or move 3 spaces, always things in threes that I'd have to do. But the voice would say, if you don't do this, I'm going to punish you, or I'm going to punish someone that you love. So I felt I had to do all these things. I believed this was the devil, and I was a bad person. Looking back now, I link this a lot to, I was struggling with my sexuality, actually. And, I come from a Jewish family. I went to a Jewish school, and I was told, being gay is a sin. And I think that had a massive impact on me. And so I think there's a link between that and the voice in my head changing. And when the voice in my head changed, it brought with it the onset of depression. I didn't know it was depression at the time. I just felt low all the time. I couldn't get out of these really low moods, and I just didn't understand what was going on. I was on the outside. I was doing really well in my GCSEs and my A-levels, and everything looked great on the outside. We didn't talk about mental health when I was growing up, so the only thing that I got when I was in school, they showed us the film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That was it. That was our mental health education, really. Has everyone seen that film? Yeah, it's not exactly the most inspiring film about mental health, is it? But that's all we got, and that film kind of put me off talking about what was going on. I didn't want to talk about what was going on in my head because I was scared and I was embarrassed. But when I was 17, I went to my GP in secret. I didn't want my parents to know, but I knew something wasn't right. I knew I had to do something. So I went to my GP, and my GP was really good. He took it really seriously. I was in a really bad place now, and he referred me on to CAMS, so the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service. And I saw CAMS, again in secret. I didn't want anyone to know. I saw CAMS, and by this time, it says here I tried to hang myself in the school toilet. So suicide had come to the forefront of my mind because it was too difficult, living with the constant low moods and the voice telling me to do things all the time and having to mask it every single day it was really hard. Unfortunately, there was a long waiting list after I had my assessment from CAMS, and I waited months and months, and I gave up waiting, and I just said to myself, I've just got to do this on my own. I came up with a plan. My plan was I was going to leave my home in North London, go off to university, and I thought that would solve everything, because people kept saying to me, university, best years of your life, and I thought it's all going to change as soon as I go off to university, going to have a fresh start, and it's all going to get better. I really, really believed this. And I went to university, and these are all my housemates at university. And I went to Manchester, and I really thought everyone was having the time of their lives at university. Everyone was always going out. Everyone was always having fun, I thought. And everything did come with me. Everything came with me. Of course it came with me. But once again, I felt I couldn't show it. I had to hide it. And I did. This is me in my second year. In my second year, things really went downhill. Started to self-harm, misuse alcohol, and just kind of gradually isolate myself away from everyone. I thought I was going crazy. I really thought I was, completely losing my mind. But I desperately didn't want anyone to see. But everything did come out in my third year, in my final year of university. So this is me in November 2007. So this is me in the first term of my third year. And it was at this point that I became psychotic. So I lost control over what I was saying and what I was doing. I felt like I was being possessed. It kind of felt like there was something inside of me and I just couldn't control what was going on. I ended up on the streets of Manchester, screaming and shouting and completely out of control. And I was picked up, I was taken to hospital, and I was put into a psychiatric hospital. I was brought back down to my parents, put into a psychiatric hospital, and I was given my diagnosis, which is something called schizoaffective disorder, which is a combination of schizophrenia and bipolar. And that was a massive shock. I knew something obviously wasn't right, but when the psychiatrist said, you've got this form of schizophrenia, it kind of felt like the end for me. Because everything I saw and read about schizophrenia growing up was negative. I never ever saw anything positive about people living with schizophrenia. So, yeah, it kind of felt like the end. By the way, this story does get better, just to say. In 3 minutes, it's going to get better. So please bear with me. But the reality was, it was just hopeless in the hospital. No one around me was getting any better. I just got worse in the hospital. And I stayed there for a month. And a month into my stay, one night I remember something in my head just kind of literally snapped. And I just said to myself, I can't do this anymore. It was just it was unbearable. It was, just unbearable. And I thought the best thing for, not just for me, but for my parents, was if I just ended my life, and that was it. Because I really thought I was going to be a burden on them for the rest of their lives. So I just thought the best thing is if I just end it. So I came up with a plan. I was going to run away the next morning from the hospital and go to a bridge, and that was going to be it. So the next morning came, typical hospital morning, medication and breakfast, and the psychiatrist came round, and I put my mask on and said, yeah, I'm all right, I'm fine. And then I told a nurse I needed a cigarette, and she let me out, and then I ran as fast as I could, and I went to a bridge, and I went onto the edge of this bridge, but I wasn't on there for very long when this stranger came along, and he stood next to me, and he began to talk to me, and I'm going to hand over to, obviously he's no longer a stranger, to carry on the conversation.
My part in this story starts a lot later in life, so there's no cute baby pictures to start with. Sorry, just me in a tank top is my opening gambit. He said it would get better in 3 minutes, so well, that's subjective. I was a personal trainer then. I was about 24 years old. That is fake tan. I'm ginger. I can't go out in the sun, so. I started working in London at that age, and coincidentally, I grew up in Watford as well. I wasn't born in Watford. I grew up there. It's one of a few coincidences of this story. And I just moved to London to start my new career as a personal trainer, working at Virgin Active Health Clubs. I started working in Covent Garden on the Strand. I started that job in November 2007. I had a month at work, and then I went back home to Watford to see my family over Christmas. I came back to Watford in January 2008, and my first working day back to work that year was the 14th of January 2008. It was Monday morning, and I got into Waterloo Terminal just after the rush hour, about 9:30, and everybody going to work that day was dressed for winter. So I came out of Waterloo Terminal, came onto Waterloo Bridge in central London, and any time of day, it's busy, but rush hour Monday morning, freezing cold, and everybody in their big winter coats just trying to get to work as quick as possible. And got onto the south side of Waterloo Bridge, and there was somebody that just stuck out like a sore thumb. So in the distance, firstly, there was this guy who was sitting on the railings of Waterloo Bridge, feet over the side. And secondly, unlike everybody else, he wasn't dressed for winter that morning. He was just wearing jeans and t-shirt and just shivering and in his own world looking out over the River Thames. So it's like a beacon. I can't get it out of my mind. And as I'm walking closer and closer, obviously there's so much going on, the traffic, the people, the pedestrians, cyclists, taxis, everything. And I genuinely thought, the next person walking by is going to say something, And that kept happening again. The next person walked by, and I thought, if I get the opportunity, I'll say something. And as this is going on in my head, I'm now the next person walking past Jonny on the same side of Waterloo Bridge. but talking people off of bridges wasn't my day job, so my chat-up line wasn't great. I said, "Hi mate, why are you sitting on a bridge?" Best chat-up line I've ever had, because it started our first conversation, and essentially he answered my question. He said, "I don't want to be here anymore, I want to take my life." And that's what I thought. So essentially it was a suicide intervention, but I didn't know it at the time. I didn't have that vocabulary in my head. It was just checking in. And I asked why, and he said, about the pain that was going on in his head, and I didn't know about the voices, the delusions, and the angel and the devil, but just about needing to find peace and that sort of stuff. And yeah, I kind of got the point. I had my phone on me. My first instinct was to get some help because I didn't know how to navigate this conversation, and I said, "Can we call somebody a family member?" And Jonny was adamant he didn't want anybody to know. He'd made his decision that day, and he didn't want me there. He didn't want anybody else. He was quite rude. He just wanted me to go away, but persistence paid off, and I think persistence is something we'll talk about later. Essentially what happened over 20-25 minutes was just a conversation, questions, and slowly Jonny started to just open up more. And we talked about everything, where he grew up, and that's where I found out he grew up in Harrow, near Watford, and there was something else to connect to just to keep the conversation going. But got to nearly half an hour and I was really out of ideas. I was starting to kind of, think, what do I do? And I said to Jonny, "Would you like to go for a coffee? There's a Cafe Nero at the end of Waterloo Bridge." And he said, "Okay." I guess I wanted to take it somewhere else and sit down and talk about it. And that seemed to be the one gesture that changed the conversation. Really, to my surprise, he said, "Okay." He stepped down from the side of the bridge. We were side by side on the pavement, and we were about to go for that coffee. I really needed it by this point. We were about to go for that coffee. That's when the police arrived. So somebody had called the police. When they turned up, it wasn't great. This police car came speeding up beside us on the side of the road, and Jonny panicked really quickly, and essentially the police restrained him. They put him in handcuffs, head down, closed the door, left him in the back of the police car on his own, and he got more and more upset. But the bizarre thing was, at the time, I thought, here we were having a really cool, calm conversation, and he's telling me about his mental health, and now he's in the back of a police car, he's just clammed up. But at the time, 11 years ago, not knowing anything about mental health, you think, well, these guys are the professionals, and I guess they know how to handle this situation. And it was a one-off situation, and we work with the police, and we know that they do an amazing job. But yeah, at the time, I just thought, okay, well, that's how you handle that situation. Anyway, I told the police anything I could to help, and they said, "Look, thanks, mate. Please go back to work." So I did. The police car drove away, and then I was back in reality again. I was on Waterloo Bridge, and I just carried on walking to work. And I genuinely thought that's where our relationship started and finished that day on the 14th of January 2008. However, I had absolutely no idea, by complete surprise, I was going to get to meet Jonny again 6 years later, but under better circumstances.
So, just to talk about my experience on the bridge. For me, this stranger did a few things which, changed everything. And the first thing was just having someone there to listen, but to really, really listen. In the hospital where I was, I said a few times I felt suicidal, and they would say to me, "Right, we'll go back to the suicide ward." And the suicide ward is everything's taken away, and someone just sits and watches you 24/7. They don't talk or listen. They just sit and they'll do their crosswords, and I don't know. No, there was just never. I don't know. There was never anyone to really be there and to really kind of to listen. But this guy just he listened with this amazing kind of patience and empathy and non-judgment, and I started to open up. I started to talk for the first time, really. Did I say non-judgment?
I did. Okay. Well, I'm saying it twice because it's really important. It was the non-judgment, because I felt so ashamed and embarrassed. And that was the other thing. So this stranger, he just said to me, mate, don't be embarrassed. You know, no need to be embarrassed. And I'd never heard anyone say that before. And that was a key thing. Yeah, because honestly, I keep on using this word, embarrassed, and I'll use it throughout and I speak to a lot of people that have mental health challenges, and it's the embarrassment and the shame that sometimes worse almost than the symptoms. And for me, it really was. I was so embarrassed about, you know, everything in my head, my diagnosis, my sexuality as well. But just for someone to say, mate, it's fine, don't be embarrassed. Yeah, felt like a massive weight off my shoulders. But the real key thing that he said to me, and I think the thing that really got through to me, he just said to me very casually, he was like, mate, you'll get better, you'll be all right. And no one had said that to me before. In the hospital where I was, my psychiatrist was saying, well, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know. But this guy had this, just this real positivity. And yeah, hearing someone say, you'll be all right, you'll get better, I think, yeah, that was the thing that literally kind of pulled me back from the edge. And I wanted to go for this coffee. I had a connection with someone, and I'd never been able to talk to someone before in this way. So I wanted to go for this coffee. I wanted to carry this conversation on. As you heard, the police came along, and we were separated, and I was taken away, and I was sectioned. I was given section 2, which that was a difficult few hours actually. But once that was done, I was then taken back to the hospital that I ran away from. I felt different on the way back to the hospital. There was still the kind of same stuff going on in my head, but I had some hope. I think that's what it was. I had a little bit of hope from talking to this guy, and you know, him saying to me, mate, you'll be all right, you'll get better. I had this bit of hope that I hadn't had before. And this hope carried me through the next few weeks and months. And eventually I was discharged. But I was a different person when I was discharged. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't have mental health issues. I didn't want to take my medication. And I came off all my medication quite quickly. And I became unwell again. This time, I believed I was the Messiah. I thought I was going to save the world. And I spent my time writing letter after letter after letter to lots of important people. This one is to Sir Paul McCartney. Didn't hear back, obviously. After that, I went through this phase. I believed I was like a reincarnation of the singer Nina Simone. I believed I was going to be a big jazz singer. I can't sing. But I made all these record demos and I sent them off to record labels, and didn't hear back from any of them either. All of my early 20s were just kind of spent, just stuck in my head. I wouldn't talk about it. No one could talk to me about it. But something changed in my mid-20s. In my mid-20s, a family friend of ours had a heart attack, and I went to see him afterwards, and we sat down and we talked for ages. He talked to me about everything he'd gone through, from the first pains in his arm while he was driving to the bypass that he had, you know, what it felt like now for him living with this heart condition. And I sat there and I remember I listened and I watched, and I just said to myself, why can you talk so openly about your health, your physical health, your heart? You know, why can't I talk about my mental health in the same way? And I went home that night and I said to myself, I need to talk, I have to talk. But see, the thing for me was I could never look someone in the eyes and talk about, you know, what was going on in my head. They used to sit me in front of therapists and I just couldn't talk. Again, because of this embarrassment and this shame, I couldn't talk. But that night, when I got home after talking to our family friend, I got my video camera out and I made a video. It was easier talking to the camera than having to look at someone. So I made a video on my camera, and I put it on YouTube under a different name back then. I didn't want my family to see. I just wanted to just connect to someone, just reach out to someone, and I thought YouTube would be a way to do that. It was amazing. People started messaging me after watching my video. People were saying, you know, I hear a voice in my head, or I've got schizoaffective disorder. It was such a relief to read all these messages and to realize that I definitely wasn't alone. There were so many other people out there going through similar things. And this is what helped me to talk. I started to make more videos. It was helping me. It was helping other people. And eventually, I got the confidence to talked to my family and friends, and I said, look, I've got mental health issues, I'm gay. And for me, that was the biggest turning point because, you know, I didn't have to hide anything anymore. I could just be myself, and I started to kind of feel more human again after that. And when I felt more human again, I said to myself, I want to give something back. I want to get involved in mental health in some way. And I started working for different mental health charities, and one in particular is called Rethink Mental Illness. Some of you might have heard of them. And I sat down with them one day, and they said, you know, tell us your story. And I told them my story. And they said to me, you know that guy on the bridge that stopped you? Have you ever thought of trying to find him and thank him for what he did? And I said, well, you know, we didn't exactly swap details. They said, why don't we try and find him? Why don't we launch a social media campaign to find him? And we did. 6 years to the day that we first met on the bridge, we launched this social media campaign on Breakfast TV. The only thing was, so I thought his name was Mike, so I called the campaign Find Mike. His name's Neil. Yeah, I know. But to be honest, if I'm honest, I didn't think we were going to find him. It seemed impossible. But we did the campaign to get people talking about not just mental health, but suicide as well. And, you know, suicide is obviously a difficult subject to address, but, you know, we have to address it. It's the biggest killer of men under 45 in this country. You know, today 12 men will kill themselves in the UK, and it's just shocking. Biggest killer of both men and women under 35 in the UK. So we have to talk about it. We need to talk about it. So we launched the campaign, and yeah, the response was huge. It was unbelievable. But the most extraordinary thing happened. We actually had 38 people come forward saying, I think it was me that helped you on the bridge. Literally one after the other, these people came forward. It was me, or it was my friend, it was my cousin. But the most just amazing thing is that these people were genuine. They had stopped someone on a bridge in London around that time. I don't think we're quite aware of, unfortunately, how many people go to bridges to jump. But we're also not aware of how many, we call them silent heroes, people like Neil. How many silent heroes there are just talking people off the edge and just then going on their way. It's just extraordinary. But none of them were the person that we were looking for. And 1 week went into 2 weeks, and we thought, you know, we're not going to find him. And then...
So, I'm just going to quickly touch on where I left off. And police car drove away, as you heard, and Jonny went through this journey. For me, I just had a short walk to work into Covent Garden from Waterloo Bridge. And when I got to work, I didn't tell anybody why I was late. Being the first time I'd ever had a conversation with somebody around the concept, the subject of suicide in my life. And I thought if I told somebody what happened, either that they would just dismiss it or maybe not even believe me. I could really hardly believe what just happened. So I didn't tell anybody at work that day. Got through to the end of the day. I called my girlfriend I was dating at the time, Sarah. I told Sarah about the conversation I had with Jonny. And then over the next couple of weeks and months, when I saw close friends and family, I would say, yeah, I was walking to work and spoke to this guy, and the police came. And actually, I felt quite positive about the interaction because, you know, he hadn't taken his life. However, I did have to walk to work over Waterloo Bridge every single working day for years. And that conversation always stuck with me. And I always did think, especially around, you know, January time, I'd always think, you know, what happened to that guy? Did he ever go back? And did he ever take his life? And yeah, it was really etched in my memory, that chat we had. Then if you fast forward 6 years later, this Find Mike campaign is out. Cheers, mate. All over the, well, he's been on Lorraine Kelly, he's been on radio and TV, and the reach was 300 million people globally, the impression of the Find Mike campaign. But I'd missed everything. So for me, things were quite busy. So it's 2014. At this time, I was running my own small personal training business. Working early mornings, late nights. I was planning my wedding to Sarah that year, so she stuck with me, good girl, and we were engaged and we had all that going on. So just really busy, not watching the TV, not watching the news, and the last thing I'm ever expecting is this conversation I had 6 years ago to come and revisit me. So one weeknight, I finish work and I get home and I'm about to go to bed, and Sarah, who I mentioned, that's us about the time of the Find Mike campaign, Sarah was on the train home from work and she calls me up. And she was quite frantic on the phone and she said, "Neil, you need to sit down, I've got something to tell you." I said, "Okay, I'm lying down, what is it?" And she said, "Well, it's about a guy called Mike." And I thought, "You're going to leave me?" Bitch. No, she's not. I was like, about a guy called Mike. She said, do you remember the guy that you spoke to 6 years ago on Waterloo Bridge? And as soon as she said that, it really just took me back a couple of seconds. I said, yeah. She said, well, I think he's trying to find you. And I'm like, Sarah, what are you talking about? She called me after she'd read this post on Facebook. So this is the exact person who shared the exact post from Rethink Mental Illness and Jonny, and we talked about the story, and she knew exactly it wasn't some guy called Mike, it was her fiancé Neil, and she ran all the way home from the station. She got to the front door, she passed me her phone, but I didn't need to read the post because Jonny's face was on there, and everything came back just as clear as yesterday, everything we talked about. And I got in touch with Rethink Mental Illness. I said, my name's Mike, but it's Neil. Went through all that. And I just, thought, right, try and get some sleep tonight. I couldn't really sleep, so I was going on the internet, finding all about Jonny, and I found these videos that he'd made, the ones that he made to reach out to help people on YouTube. And me and Sarah, we watched some of Jonny's videos that evening, and that's, I think, when it really dawned on me, that guy, he never took his life and he never went back, but he's actually thriving and he's helping people, and he's a voice for mental health. And it really dawned on me, the power of that really small conversation that I'd almost forgotten about years ago had actually had such a big transformational effect years later. And there's definitely a message there about, the small things that, we can do every day. So I did get an email back from Rethink Mental Illness. They put us together a week later, and we have a short clip to share when we met for the second time in January 2014.
When he walked through the door, I was just a bag of nerves. I've never been so scared in my whole life.
Oh yeah. How you doing? Good.
I'm ready.
Hey.
I'm alright.
Yeah?
I'm alright. You?
Good.
I didn't instantly recognise him, but there was something there. There was something that was familiar about him as he approached me.
I saw you on the TV. Yeah, I saw you speaking on the TV. Don't be nervous, honestly.
And then it was when we sat down, we began talking. There was a moment when everything just came back to me, and I could see him there on that bridge, and there he was now in front of me, and it was just overwhelming. It's just unbelievable because, oh my gosh,
Do you remember me?
Yeah, now I've seen you, it's all coming back.
Really?
You standing on the side of me, and
He definitely said, it's all coming back now, and I can remember your mannerisms, and I can remember your voice, and I can see you.
You can tell he understands, and he doesn't judge, and just sits there with his this big smile, and I think everyone could do with a friend like Neil.
It's difficult actually to put into words what that was like. It was, very, very special, very, very special moment. We just talked for ages and ages. It was like we were old friends. It was, amazing. After that, once obviously I got his name right, Neil, not Mike, said to me, well, what can we do together? How can we raise awareness together? And
We've been working together ever since, and it's been a remarkable journey. The best thing about what we do is getting messages such as this, which says, thanks for the various steps you've taken over the past few weeks to highlight mental health issues. Watching your story unfold stopped me from taking my own life, so a big thank you, mate. We need to hear more positive stories when it comes to mental health, more stories of hope and recovery, and it's definitely changing. I think we're really moving forward, and it's an exciting time, I think. After that, our documentary, The Stranger on the Bridge, came out on Channel 4, and another really kind of positive response to that. And this kind of opened up quite a few doors for us, and we've got another short video just to show you some of the highlights of the last few years that we've been working together.